In our headlines on this Friday, May 22nd, here in South Korea, Donald Trump claims that Iran will surrender its stockpile of enriched uranium to the US, which will then be destroyed. Iran, for its part, has rejected this claim. And the two South Korean activists were earlier detained by Israel while aboard a humanitarian aid flotilla bound for Gaza returned home today and vowed to re-embark on a similar mission. Meanwhile, exports of South Korean cosmetics hit a trade surplus of over $10 billion for the first time last year, as the Korean wave keeps global interest in all things Korean at an all-time high. U.S. President Donald Trump insists that Iran will surrender its stockpile of enriched uranium to the U.S., which will then be destroyed. Our Lee Soo-jin covers these remarks and more.
The U.S. and Iran remain locked in opposition over control over the Strait of Hormuz and Tehran's nuclear program. Speaking at the White House on Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump said Iran would not be allowed to keep its stockpile of highly enriched uranium and reaffirmed Washington's belief that it will be used for a nuclear weapon.
No, we get the highly enriched. We will get it. We don't need it. We don't want it. We'll probably destroy it after we get it, but we're not going to let them have it.
Iran, however, insists that its nuclear ambitions are purely for civilian purposes. According to Reuters, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has directed officials not to allow the enriched uranium, which is believed to total 440 kilograms, to leave the country. Iranian leadership reportedly believes that surrendering the stockpile would leave the country vulnerable to future U.S. or Israeli attacks. Before departing for a NATO ministerial meeting in Sweden on the same day, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said there had been some progress in talks, but called out Iran over its efforts to implement tolls for ships wishing to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. He added that any diplomatic resolution would become impossible if Iran goes ahead with a toll system. Rubio also expressed frustration with European allies who had refused to grant military base access during the conflict.
No one in the world is in favor of a tolling system. It can't happen. It would be unacceptable. It would make a diplomatic deal unfeasible if they were to continue to pursue that. So it's a threat to the world if they were to try to do that. And it's completely illegal. I don't think anyone is shocked to know that the United States and the president in particular is very disappointed at NATO right now.
Although little progress appears to have been made since a fragile ceasefire 6 weeks ago, a diplomatic window is still open. One of the peace talks' central mediators, Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir, possibly left for Tehran on Thursday for talks, according to sources from Reuters. U.S. officials indicate that the outcome of Pakistani-led meetings over the coming days will determine the fate of the ceasefire. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Also on the international front, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin sat down in Beijing this past Wednesday and reaffirmed their commitment toward a multipolar world, amid reports of the Chinese leader planning to visit North Korea in the days ahead. Our Kim Bo-kyung has details.
Following meetings with U.S. President Trump on May 14th and then Russian President Putin on the 20th, now Xi is expected to travel to Pyongyang as early as next week to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In a joint statement, China and Russia advocated for a multipolar world and a new type of international relations, with a warning that the world faces the risk of regressing to the law of the jungle.
The world today is far from peaceful, with unilateralism and hegemonism posing profound dangers. The world faces the risk of regressing to the law of the jungle.
We will develop our bilateral cooperation and actively collaborate on international platforms, where our colleagues, working closely together, are creating a strong foundation for sustainable development toward a multipolar world.
Now, eyes are on the possibility of Chinese leader Xi's visit to North Korea, with the Blue House releasing a statement on Thursday that the South Korean government is closely watching developments and hopes that exchanges between North Korea and China will contribute to peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Many sources, including U.S. magazine Time, also reported that China's security and protocol teams recently visited Pyongyang for preparations for a visit, and that Xi Jinping may visit North Korea as early as next week. If Xi Jinping visits North Korea, it will be the first time in 7 years since June 2019. Many are expecting the agenda to include a possible restarting of North Korea-US talks, as China has said that Xi and Trump discussed the peninsula issue during their talks. One expert said Xi could advise Kim to resume talks with Trump.
Even without mentioning denuclearization, a promise to reduce nuclear weapons and gradually lift sanctions could still be very favorable to North Korea. That's why there may be advice to consider meeting President Trump.
However, the expert added that there are still worries that it could strengthen cooperation between China, North Korea, and Russia, as they are seeing right now, as Putin said, a great opportunity to change the U.S.-led global order. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the two South Korean activists who were earlier detained and then deported by Israel for attempting to aid civilians in Gaza arrived home earlier on this Friday. They vowed to re-embark on a similar mission despite exposure to rampant violence while in detainment. Our Cha Yun-kyung reports.
Two Korean activists who were captured by Israeli forces after boarding an aid ship bound for the Gaza Strip returned home on Friday morning. Kim Ha-hyun and Kim Dong-hyun arrived at Incheon Airport at around 6:30 a.m. on a flight from Bangkok, Thailand. After returning, Kim Ha-hyun said that another trip to Gaza might be unavoidable, with people dying as a result of bomb blasts and famine. Several pictures showing the activists kneeling down with their hands tied have led to widespread shock. Kim also alleged that she was assaulted while being detained in Israel, with the military there extremely enraged. She also maintained that she was struck in the face several times, leading to hearing problems in her left ear. Italian activists who had flown home earlier also testified that Israeli forces had treated them harshly. Kim, who was arrested by Israeli forces in waters of the Gaza Strip on Tuesday local time, participated in the same voyage in October last year. Her passport is currently invalid because she left the country despite travel restrictions from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Regarding this, she said people have the right to move to wherever they want to go, and even though the government blocked her passport, she also has a right to do what she wants. Her return was completed using a travel certificate issued by the ministry. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
Members of the labor union at Samsung Electronics have begun voting on the tentative deal reached between the management and union representatives late Wednesday night regarding wages and bonuses. Our Park Chun-han has the latest.
A union vote began on Friday for a tentative wage and bonus agreement between Samsung Electronics union and management, with the outcome set to determine whether the deal officially takes legal effect. The company's labor union launched its electronic vote on Friday at 2:12 p.m., which will continue through to next Wednesday at 10 a.m. The agreement will pass if a majority of eligible union members participate and more than half vote in favor. If the proposal is rejected, labor and management will have to resume negotiations. The tentative 2026 wage deal includes a newly created special management performance bonus funded with 10.5% of agreed business performance earnings, with no ceiling on payouts. Beyond the bonuses, the two sides agreed on a 6.2% average wage increase. They also expanded welfare benefits, including a new company housing loan system worth up to 500 million won, or around $330,000. Brokerage firms estimate Samsung Electronics could post operating profits of around $200 billion this year. If that forecast holds, employees in the memory chip division could receive combined bonuses worth up to $400,000, including both the new special bonus and existing excess profit incentive pay. The special management bonus will be paid entirely in company stock after taxes. Even employees in non-memory semiconductor businesses, including the system LSI and foundry divisions, are projected to receive at least $105,000 in bonuses through the semiconductor division's share profit distribution program. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
President Jin Mi-song and International Labour Organization Director General Gilbert Houngbo sat down at the Blue House on this Friday to address the organization's participation in the government's Global AI Hub initiative, among other labour-related matters. And speaking of those matters, the President shared hopes for the ILO to take on a greater role in the advent of the AI era that is expected to significantly transform the global labour market, while asking for insight with regard to South Korea's labour policy. He also welcomed the ILO's decision to join South Korea's Global AI Hub initiative. The ILO is one of many UN entities that has signed on to the Seoul-led initiative that was announced back on Thursday. Also, the government has launched a new investment fund that links public cash with next-generation industries, and demand on this day one of the launch was overwhelming, to say the least. Our economics correspondent Kim Jun-hong explains.
A government-backed investment fund offering tax incentives and partial loss protection opened to the public on Friday. The so-called Public Participation Fund gathers investors from the public and distributes them across multiple fund managers. The fund saw overwhelming demand on its first day of sales, with online allocations at major banks and brokerage firms selling out within 10 minutes. Branch offices also saw a rush of subscriptions, with firms expecting remaining allocations to be snapped up quickly. The strong response was seen as being fueled by tax incentives and the chance for ordinary investors to join a policy-driven fund. The program comprises 600 billion won, or approximately $395 million raised from the public, and 120 billion won from state funding. Subscriptions will remain open for 3 weeks through June 11th at banks and brokerages on a first-come, first-served basis. Investors are offered government-backed protection covering up to 20% of losses, along with tax deductions of up to 18 million won. However, only one-time investments are allowed, with funds locked in for 5 years. The initiative is part of the National Growth Fund launched last year to foster future industries. Its feeder funds are set to invest in sectors such as AI, biotech, and semiconductors, industries heavily represented on Korea's tech-focused Gov't-backed market. Enthusiasm over the fund appeared to spill over into the junior bourse on Friday, with the Gov't-backed closing up 4.99%. The market also triggered a buy-side sidecar early in the session after its 150 futures index jumped more than 6% in intraday trading.
Anticipation of fresh funds flowing into Gov't-backed sectors such as chips, robotics, and biotech appears to be boosting investor sentiment. The expected inflow is also seen as supportive for market liquidity.
Yet caution remains against excessive expectations, with actual growth and performance from the fund-backed companies needing monitoring. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, consumer sentiment bounced back in May on the back of stellar chip exports and a bullish stock market. According to the Bank of Korea on this Friday, the composite consumer sentiment index stands at 106.1 this month. That's up 6.9 points on month, the highest in 11 months. A reading above 100 means optimism outweighs pessimism. Meanwhile, the housing price prospect index also jumped 8 points to 112 amid a drop in apartment listings, especially here in capital Seoul. Meanwhile, inflation expectations for the year ahead dropped 0.1 percentage point to 2.8% in light of government efforts to stabilize prices. On the export front, overseas shipments of South Korean beauty products saw a trade surplus of over $10 billion for the first time last year. Our Ian Jin covers this milestone.
South Korea's cosmetics exports set a new milestone in 2025. Data released from the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety on Friday showed a trade surplus in cosmetic products exceeding $10 billion. That's an increase of 13.5% from a year earlier. Data also showed that this surplus accounted for 12.9% of the country's overall trade surplus. Korea's cosmetics trade recorded its first surplus in 2012 at $90 million and has since shown steep growth. After a slight dip in 2021, the industry has seen a consistent upward trend in the size of the surplus. While the trade surplus broke the $10 billion barrier in 2025, cosmetics exports first crossed this threshold in 2024. Exports increased by 11.8% in 2025. South Korea's global ranking in cosmetics exports also rose, from third place in 2024 to second place last year, its highest ranking yet. In first was France with $24.3 billion, and in third was the United States with $10.8 billion. The number of countries importing Korean cosmetics reached 202 last year, an increase of 30 countries from the year prior, while South Korea's cosmetics imports decreased by 2.3%. A ministry official stated that South Korea has further solidified its position as a powerhouse leading global beauty trends. The primary product category driving the growth of K-beauty exports was skincare, which accounted for roughly 75% of exports, with facial packs and masks showing the highest growth rates within that category. Record performances in the cosmetics industry are seen to be driven by the also growing global popularity of Korean cultural content, like K-pop and K-dramas. Jin, Arirang News.
And on the entertainment front, Korean film director Jin Mi-song won second prize in the La Cinef category at this year's Cannes Film Festival. The award honors outstanding student films, and Jin was applauded for her 17-minute production, Silent Voices. Jin, in response, voiced her appreciation for the acknowledgement. Her film shares the story of a Korean immigrant family in New York. Actions speak louder than words. Now, this is the mindset that climate activists at an inaugural joint forum here in Seoul are now calling for as they highlight the race against time with regard to climate campaign. Our Chung Hae-rim was there.
A GGGI-GCF Joint Conference marks a new level of cooperation between green policy design and financial execution. For the first time since they were founded, the Global Green Growth Institute and the Green Climate Fund have shared a single stage, with the agenda aiming to use South Korea as a base to launch concrete climate projects in developing countries.
Climate change does not respect national borders, and it does not care about political views. I have been speaking out repeatedly many times around the world. There is not a single country in this world, however powerful, however resourceful, no country can do it alone.
This is happening at a moment when international cooperation is more fragile than it has been in a generation. Stepping back on multilateral climate action is the wrong instinct. Korea has put its weight and capital behind global climate action, and their leadership at home is widely recognized and applauded.
Leaders at the conference emphasized taking immediate action rather than holding endless debates. GGGI has now grown to 55 member states and helped secure $4 billion in green investments last year. For the GCF, it has already committed $20 billion to 353 projects worldwide, reaching nearly 1.8 billion people in developing countries.
GCF is about finance, and GGGI is about implementation. When they work together, we can scale up and speed up climate actions for the world. By doing green transformation initiative, AI transformation initiative, Korea will become a next generation global hub.
Additionally, through the Korea Green New Deal Trust Fund, domestic institutions like the Korea Development Bank are actively lowering investment risks abroad, including a $100 million energy efficiency project in Indonesia. Future joint efforts will also focus on green AI and the global voluntary carbon market. Thursday's joint conference shows that South Korea is no longer just a host country providing office space, but an active architect creating a new ecosystem for global climate action. Chung Hae-rim, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States will send an additional 5,000 troops to Poland. Trump on Thursday said the reason for the decision was his personal relationship with Poland's newly elected president, Karol Nawrocki, whom he said he is, quote, proud to endorse. The announcement comes 2 days after Vice President J.D. Vance had said the deployment had been delayed. The U.S. had been expected to scale back its troop presence in Europe following Trump's demands that NATO play a greater role in its own defense. Ebola has been confirmed in the Democratic Republic of Congo's South Kivu province, hundreds of kilometers from the outbreak's epicenter in Ituri. The outbreak has now killed 160 people, with 670 suspected cases. Uganda has suspended flights to Congo as a precaution. In the town of Rampara, police fired warning shots and tear gas after the family of a suspected Ebola victim refused a safe burial and protesters burned down 2 medical treatment tents. 6 patients being treated inside were moved to hospital. Experts say confirmed cases likely represent only the tip of the iceberg. A French appeals court handed down a guilty verdict on Thursday against Air France and Airbus over the worst aviation disaster in French history. In 2009, a flight from Rio de Janeiro to Paris went down in the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 228 people aboard. Investigators found that the crash was due to the pilots stalling the plane while trying to deal with iced-up sensors. The court handed down a fine of $261,000 to each company, widely dismissed as a token penalty given the company's revenues. Both companies announced they would take the case to France's highest court. Chicago's Field Museum opens the Pokémon Fossil Museum on Friday, the first time the Japanese exhibition has been displayed outside Japan. The exhibit compares real Asian fossils with fossil-based Pokémon characters from the video game series. It was developed by Japan's National Museum of Nature and Science and the Pokémon Company. The exhibition runs until April 2027. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
The brief break from the heat is over, as temperatures have started rising again today. We'll see this warming trend continue over the coming days. Daytime highs on Sunday will reach around 27 degrees Celsius, and by Monday, temperatures will climb to around 30 degrees. So we're expecting mostly sunny weather through the long weekend starting tomorrow. However, on Saturday, light rain of less than 5 millimeters is forecast for the east coast of Gyeongsang-Buk-do province and Jeju Island. A few sprinkles may also develop across the capital area and Chungcheong-Namdo province. Overall, rainfall will be quite light, so outdoor plants should not be significantly affected. Tomorrow, UV levels are expected to be high in many areas, so don't forget to wear sunscreen before heading outside. Tomorrow's Seoul will start the day at 15 degrees, Chuncheon at 12 degrees, Busan at 16 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 24 degrees, Daegu and both Jeju will all top out at 22 degrees. Looking ahead on Tuesday, another round of rain is expected nationwide. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, so do stay with us and thank you for now.